Let's start with a sentence that actually makes a lot of salon owners uncomfortable. You ready for it? It's my team doesn't like to sell. My team doesn't like to sell. And if you that thought has ever crossed your mind, we want you to know something first. You are not alone. Hallelujah, right? And you are not wrong for feeling frustrated. But today we're going to gently challenge the meaning behind that sentence. Because what if your team doesn't hate selling? What if they've simply never been taught how to do it with confidence? Confidence comes from the root word fidere, which means to trust. So they trust themselves to do it. And what if that real cost of that gap is far bigger than missed retail sales?
Yes, I agree, Jen. It's probably far bigger than missed retail sales because, in our industry, selling has quietly or not so quietly become a dirty word. It often gets associated with pressure, manipulation, pushing, being salesy, or taking advantage of people. So many beauty pros grow up believing if I'm good enough at my craft, the selling part shouldn't matter. Or worse, if I sell, I'm being selfish. So what do? They under recommend, they avoid conversations, they think they're staying safe. They wait for the guest to ask, not because they don't care, but because no one has ever showed them a better way.
Yeah, and so when salon owners think about the cost of not selling, they usually think about money, right? Like those missed upgrades, those lower tickets, even those flat retail numbers. But truly, the real cost goes much deeper than that. When a team isn't taught how to sell, guests don't fully get served, problems don't fully get solved, results aren't fully optimized, and trust quietly erodes because selling isn't convincing someone to buy something. Like it truly is not convincing someone to buy something. Selling is helping someone say yes to what they already want. And when that doesn't happen, everyone loses. Lindsay, it reminds me of we were in, I think it was Arizona, do it for
Mm,
a training, and we went and got a pedicure
mm.
after our training, and we wanted the new color. I think it was the new it color for, I don't even remember what time. This is the winter time, right? And the color was matte, but it was the it color. And so we asked the guy, we're like, "Hey, is it? Can we upgrade to this?" He said, and remind me if I forget anything, but he said, "Well, it's gonna be $5 more." Like, okay, no worries. And he's like, and it's gonna chip and it's gonna look dirty and it's gonna look it's just not gonna look good. But and it's $5 more. What did he say anything else? I can't remember in that moment.
No, he thought we were gonna be really worried about that $5. He's like, "It's $5 more." Like, he
Yeah.
kept saying that.
We're
Like,
like, okay, yeah,
"Okay,
$5. Great.
got
Here's
it."
$5. Yeah. And so it just that probably happens in our salon sometimes too
Mhm.
without even realizing it. Is just that was just a really interesting experience how like we almost talk people out of a $5 add-on. And you know what? That $5 add-on was one of the best pedicures I ever had. It lasted like 8 weeks. So, if you're hearing this and you get pedicures, that's a long time.
Mhm. Yeah, because, it was we were he could have just helped us say yes to something we already wanted. So I
Uh-huh.
want you to picture this. A guest sits in your chair and casually says, "My hair just never feels the way I want it to." The service provider nods, they emphasize, they have empathy for the guest, they listen, but then they move on. No diagnosis, no recommendation, no plan, not because they didn't know what would help, but because they didn't know how to say it. That guest leaves with the same problem and the quiet belief that this is just how my hair is. That's
Yeah.
not neutral. That's a missed opportunity to lead that guest. Recently we actually just got a 4-star review in the salon. I know it's not the end of the world, but man, it felt like it in that moment because that guest went on and on about what a great experience she had in the salon. She enjoyed her beverage and the welcome into the salon. But what upset her was the stylist didn't use a straight razor on her hair. And, I don't know if her hair was curly or, there could have been who knows what it was, but that client wanted a razor used on her hair, and so sometimes, just like our matte polish story, we need to make our teams aware on how to give the guest what they want. Because at the end of the day, you can educate the guest. You can say, absolutely, I'm happy to do what you believe is best for you. Here's a little bit of education, and you can make the best decision, and we'll move forward. The gentleman at the nail salon could have approached that the same way. Hey, just so you know, we have gotten this feedback. We're happy to do it for you. I just want to give you a heads up in case it happens to you. So when we set the guest up, like if they've already decided, yes, this is the only way forward, us meeting them with resistance does not help lead that conversation in a productive way where the guest feels supported.
Mhm. And as salon owners, you're thinking, "Okay, great. They want a razor. I didn't have one. Guys, go back there and give me a knife. We'll get if this client wants some razor, we'll give her some razoring today." Like it's a salon owner. Sometimes it's always natural. It's natural
Mhm.
for us to create that solution, or to really make the guests feel cared for because that's important to them. But just have to
Mhm.
remember that your team doesn't always view it through that lens. So making sure they have the tools and the systems in place so they can see opportunities and possibilities. I just had to throw that in there because I could see myself when as soon as you said that, I was like, "Where's the knife? Oh, we'll razor something. It'll be the best cut you ever had of your life." Because truly,
Oh.
guys, like, here's the belief that's quietly running many salons that selling is optional, right? But
Mhm.
in reality, especially if you scroll TikTok, like, or Instagram, any kind of social media feeds, like, you'll see it these days too. Like, why do we have to sell retail? Because we're hairstylists, right? So we've created this belief that selling is optional, but really in reality, like if your team doesn't sell retails, guests do not get the best outcome. Team members don't grow financially, the confidence stays low, the motivation fades, and the owners carry more pressure. And over time, resentment starts to build on both sides, not because people are bad, but because expectations were never taught.
So good. Jen, when you said that about TikTok, I was thinking on if you scroll TikTok, you'll see the exact one you were talking about. And then on the next one, there'll be some 19-year-old who doesn't care about anything. She's trying to sell you whatever
Yep.
she's trying to sell you.
Yep.
So let's redefine selling because selling is listening deeply. It's diagnosing honestly. It's recommending confidently, and it's guiding with integrity
Mm.
because selling is leadership. And leadership without teaching isn't leadership, it's just hoping.
Mhm. You mentioned that word diagnosis or diagnosing honestly. And when I discovered that diagnosis comes from the root word metamorphosis, which if you think of a butterfly, goes through a metamorphosis, like that transformation. Like when we truly diagnose someone honestly, like you just mentioned, like you're helping them create that transformation. And so
Mhm,
I just like if you truly understand the word diagnosis, it's just like, wow, that's so incredible that we get to do that every single day in our salons.
mhm.
Um, and here's the part that gives salon owners their power back. If your team struggles with selling, it's not a character flaw. It's actually just a training gap. Super easy. And gaps don't get fixed by, pep talks, pressure, posting numbers on a wall, telling people to just try harder. They get fixed by teaching a process, a step by step with language, with repetition, with safety, because confidence doesn't come from motivation, it actually comes from competence. Um,
Yeah. Jen, that reminds me of a salon owner that shared with us one time. They were doing a retail competition, and um, She was very frustrated and mentioned, well, Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk, they don't run billion-dollar companies by going in and helping people be better. They did it by telling them what to do, and they did it. And I think that that's a misconception. Of course, they probably have some leaders on the team that are training, but in any good company, there's people always training to the systems and always
Mhm.
making sure it goes back there and making sure that people have that language. They understand the process on how to get there, because it's not going to happen, like you mentioned, Jen, by pressure
Mhm.
or pep talks alone. It's going to happen by giving them the words, practicing, doing all the things. So, what is the real cost of not teaching your team how to sell? Because it's not just revenue, it's stalled careers, it's burned out owners, it's guests who don't get what they need, and it's also teams who never realize what they're truly capable of. And that cost compounds quietly until something breaks,
Mhm.
because it really just makes me think about when people don't know the difference between a good haircut and a bad haircut. They you will never hear a guest say, I don't have the tools to recreate my look at home, so that's why I don't like it. No, what they're gonna say is, "I got a bad haircut from XYZ salon," because all of a sudden they can't remember the name of the stylist who did it. They're gonna say, "I got a bad haircut there." But the truth is, when they don't have the tools to recreate their look at home, they're never gonna feel supported.
Mhm. Yeah. So listen, if you've ever felt frustrated with selling in your salon, I want you to hear this clearly. Your team isn't broken, they're just untaught. And teaching is one of the most generous things a leader can do. So stay with us because the next week we're going to be talking about a moment where selling is either won or lost. The moment that most salons rush through without realizing its power. And you guys, once you see it, you'll never look at consultations the same way again.